Kentucky basketball struck gold with guard Reed Sheppard a season ago. Could they possibly have another version of Sheppard on this year's roster? We'll talk about it on today's episode of Locked On Kentucky.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, and on today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we are going to be having a conversation about Kentucky basketball guard Travis Perry. He's got some traits, some strengths that I think are comparable to Reed Sheppard from a season ago. Could we be seeing maybe a dark horse guard in the backcourt that we're not talking about enough? Apparently, he's been throwing down in practice as of late. We'll talk about all of that, as well as Dick Vitale's top 16 teams heading into the college basketball season. Just put out his rankings recently, and he's got Kentucky in there. Let's talk about what Mr. Vitale has to say about the Wildcats alongside some other big-time college basketball programs on today's episode. Thank you so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. Want to remind everyone out there that we are free and available on all platforms, and if you are watching on YouTube, I would greatly appreciate it if you subscribe to the show, and if you are listening on podcast, I would also appreciate it if you subscribed there as well. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. You can download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. So Travis Perry, four-star guard committed to the Kentucky Wildcats. I think he could be flying under the radar for UK throughout the course of this offseason. And the reason that I want to bring this up here today is that we've already seen this type of thing happen with the Wildcats recently. If you look at last offseason, Reed Sheppard came in as one of the lower-rated pieces in Kentucky's incredible 2023 recruiting class. He was rated as a four-star prospect, and there was not a ton of hype surrounding Sheppard and what he could potentially be for the Wildcats, and we really didn't get to see what Sheppard was truly capable of until the season actually started. Obviously, there were some scrimmages and some opportunities for Reed to show his stuff shooting the basketball, but we really didn't get to fully realize statistically what Sheppard was capable of until we got into some of these bigger games. And as the season went on, there were a lot of fans clamoring, myself included, for Sheppard to play a bigger role with the team given how efficient he was in a variety of areas. That never truly came, and so one and done is the story of Reed Sheppard with Kentucky basketball, an incredible player and somebody that is absolutely tearing it up with the Houston Rockets in the Summer League into just 2 games into his NBA career, looking like a very, very solid pick at number 3 overall. It's actually really funny. I didn't even plan on talking about this today, but at H. Clayton Art on Twitter, she provides stickers and prints of Kentucky basketball and football players, and I've got one of Reed Sheppard right here, and I will be placing it on my computer here very soon. But Sheppard, one of my favorite players to watch right now, both in the NBA and obviously during his time at UK. But he was an unknown commodity for the majority of the time that he was committed and then practicing and then on campus in Lexington for the Cats. I think they could have a similar story brewing here this season with a new head coach in Mark Pope. I think they've got a player that is kind of, I want to say Perry is kind of tailor-made to the style of play that Mark Pope wants to have, especially compared to what Coach Cal was doing just a season ago. Travis Perry, in case you don't know, we'll go ahead and break this down for you on the player rating system. 6'2", 175-pound point guard. He also is listed as a combo guard at different spots. 4-star prospect, rated as the number 77 overall player, number 7 point guard, and number 1 player out of the state of Kentucky. There were crystal ball predictions for him to end up going to Cincinnati. He ended up picking the Wildcats. Coach Cal left for the Arkansas Razorbacks, and Perry was the only player that stayed with UK. Mark Pope was able to keep him, and what was he known as coming out of high school? He was known as a 3-point shooter, just an excellent scorer during his time in high school. Final season of high school, he averaged 29.5 points, 5.4 rebounds, 5 assists, 3.9 steals per game, leading Lyon County to the Sweet 16 and a 36-3 record. According to A Sea of Blue, he also made a career 712 three-pointers. This kid was lights out from beyond the arc during his senior season. Reed Sheppard, similar. He was obviously known as a really good three-point shooter, a smart basketball player, a player that made everybody around him better, and you're seeing some similar conversations when it comes to Perry, especially if you go and look at his scouting report. This is what Travis Branham had to say all the way back in November of 2023. He said, Perry is a 6'1" guard that has a knack for always seeming to make the right play. He may lack outstanding physical tools with his height and length, but he makes up for it with tremendous feel, skills, and instincts for the game. He's a tough, hard-nosed competitor that can create off-the-dribble, drill shots from three, and sets the table for those around him. Defensively, Perry brings good energy each possession and uses his feel and IQ to anticipate moves and plays both on and off the ball to make an impact. Perry doesn't have a ton of upside, but he has a very high floor with his ability to consistently make the right plays on both ends of the court, ultimately impacting winning at the collegiate level. Reed Sheppard was tabbed as not the most athletic guy, but a very good shooter, a smart player, and one that was anticipatory on the defensive side of the basketball. You are putting, essentially, in ways, the same type of player, the same archetype of player, in a new system that is going to encourage him to be more like himself. Last year, and I think that we're definitely seeing it with the Summer League and how Reed Sheppard's breaking out last year, Sheppard looks like he was limited. He was held back. There were things that he was not allowed to do. He was not allowed to create the way that he could have. And through 2 games in the NBA, we're seeing that Sheppard has an extremely high ceiling whenever he is kind of taken off the reins and he is kind of let loose a little bit. Perry, I don't think he's going to be playing in an NBA-style system here with Mark Pope. I mean, you could make that argument given how many threes Kentucky wants to take. But I think as far as encouragement to play the style of basketball that made him really, really good coming out of high school, you're going to see Travis Perry go out here, and if he gets the minutes and he is as efficient as he was in high school shooting the rock, you're going to see him shine. And the most interesting thing that we're hearing as of right now to kind of back this up is what's happening throughout practice. Andrew Carr, Wake Forest transfer, power forward for the Kentucky Wildcats, recently had an interview talking about Perry and how he's been shooting in summer practice. And here's the direct quote from A Sea of Blue. He said, Travis Perry has done a really great job. Sometimes you walk in and he's at 500, 600 shots up in the day, something like that. And he's still at 85%. And I'm like, how's that possible? I look over and it's all threes. He's at 85%. It's pretty crazy. He made 59 in a row from the corner the other day. It's incredible. 85% on 500 to 600 threes in practice. It's a kid that can shoot 59 in a row from the corner. This kid can knock it down. And I don't want to hype him up and say that, oh, Travis Perry has a Reed Sheppard-like trajectory or even a Reed Sheppard-like ceiling, but you do see similar things out of both of these guards. They collect steals. They set their teammates up well. They have a really solid three-point shot. Both of them can create extremely well off the dribble. They're similar height, similar stature. You're going to see Perry, when he is able to contribute, when he has the opportunities, I think you're going to see him execute more often than not this fall. Something I'll also read here from Reed Sheppard's 24/7 Sports Evaluation. This was back in July of 2022 from Adam Finkelstein. Sheppard is a throwback style guard who is skilled and exceptionally sound fundamentally. He's a solid athlete, but not dynamic or totally explosive. His attack is based on his ability to shoot the ball, make sound decisions, and process the game. He has a high and compact release that allows him to get a shot off and rates as one of the best free throw shooters on any of the 3 major circuits at over 90%. Strong with ball, tight and efficient as a handler, good use of both hands, snaps his passes, confident in his approach, capable of playing on and off the ball, tad upright off the dribble, lacks an extra gear of burst, converted only 29% of his three-point attempts as a result during his time on one circuit. He's a better shooter than that number indicates. His three-point range is going to be an even bigger emphasis at the next level, so being a driller is crucial. There are numerous things that you can point to between both of these two players and say, yeah, they operated similarly. They're from the state of Kentucky. They play the same. The style is almost identical in ways. I think Travis Perry in a better system, in a stronger system, is going to be able to go out there and prove a lot of people, not necessarily wrong, but when it comes to the way that Kentucky's rotation is kind of expected to play out this season, I think he's going to shock some people, and he's definitely going to get in and get his minutes. So let me know what you think in the comments below about Travis Perry. Could he be a surprise player for the Wildcats this upcoming season? All right, I want to dive into here Dick Vitale's college basketball Sweet 16 ratings. He has a breakdown here of the top 16 teams heading into the 2024-25 season, and he's got the Wildcats in there. What do we think about the Wildcats' placement, and where should they be relative to some other SEC teams? I'll just go ahead and tell you, I think there should be some moving and shuffling, as we have discussed with various AP and college basketball preseason projections as of late. Before we get into all of that, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. And eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you are into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you will always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car into the MVP you need and bring home huge wins. You can keep your ride or die alive over at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. All right, continuing along here on the Monday edition of Locked On Kentucky, Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. Again, I really appreciate you guys checking out the show today. If you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel or the podcast feed, I would greatly appreciate it if you did so. Let's talk here for a little bit about Kentucky basketball inside Dick Vitale's 2024-25 preseason Sweet 16. You can find this article over on ESPN.com. Was released just a couple of days ago. He talks about the era of free agency, how it's hit all collegiate sports. It's been interesting to see how coaches who used to sell a program and a university lifestyle have now become general managers, so to speak, putting together teams based on market value. He said, with that in mind, let's take a preliminary look at the top teams heading into the season and some of their key players. These are the contenders, according to Vitale, and he has the Kansas Jayhawks, unsurprisingly, as the number one preseason team heading into next season. It's almost a letdown if you look at on paper at teams like Kansas, teams like Alabama, teams like Duke. It would be almost a letdown for these stacked juggernaut-type squads to roll into 2024-25 and not only have a successful regular season, but not make a deep NCAA tournament run. There are so many different teams on paper this season that just look solid from top to bottom. And the Jayhawks, I think, deservedly so, should be number one. KJ Adams, Hunter Dickinson, DJ Harris, AJ Storrs coming in from Wisconsin, Rylan Griffin from Alabama, Zeke Mayo, who was a bucket at South Dakota State, Noah Shelby from Rice. They also have a couple of really high-profile prospects. I mean, Kansas is really, really, really good. And you start to work your way down the list here. It's obviously, like Dick said, the top 15 teams, or 16, excuse me, in the country. And for the most part, when we've been looking at these preseason rankings, Kentucky's either been unranked, towards the bottom half of the top 25, or just barely outside of it. Like if you're looking at a top 25 and 1 or something like that, you've seen Kentucky placed in a variety of spots, but usually not very high. And I would say over the past month and a half or so, you've started to see Kentucky rise in certain aspects, getting closer to that top 15. For Vitale to have Kentucky at 15 out of 16 teams, some of you may say, well, that's towards the bottom of the rankings. I still say, hey, if you did a full top 25, I think Kentucky fans would absolutely take a preseason 15 ranking, especially considering all of the different factors. Your coach left for another SEC program. You have a completely new roster. You had to build it in essentially a month with a new head coach. A lot of things are trying to be figured out. How will this team look on paper? We're not going to truly know the ceiling of this team until we start to see them actually perform. So at number 15, I'm very happy with this. I don't think that there's any reason to be disgruntled or upset with this. There are a couple of other teams that are above Kentucky that you could get upset with. But I think 15 is a very fair spot to put UK heading into the season. If they're able to do the thing and win a large majority of their non-con games, if they're able to beat Duke in Atlanta, which is a tall task, if they are able to go on the road and defeat Clemson and Ohio State, and possibly go and beat Gonzaga as well. Very difficult tasks. Again, I want to reiterate. If they're able to get out of those 4 games, a win against Gonzaga and a win against Clemson, or a win against Ohio State, I think a lot of fans would be really excited, and I think Kentucky at that point should be ranked 15th or somewhere around there. If they're able to get a win against everybody except for maybe the Zags in Seattle, you get a win against Duke, you get a win against a top 25 team in Ohio State. You really start to build a strong resume, pick up some quad 1 wins if you're able to beat Clemson on the road as well. If you're able to beat Louisville, who could end up being a quad 1 team at the end of the day if they're able to have the season that Pat Kelsey and company expect to have. Kentucky's got the opportunity to really build the resume here, and that's when you start to sort of expect a rise in the rankings, so to speak. You should also, I think, expect a dip from some of these other teams that I just really don't believe in. And one of them I've harped a lot on recently. I'm going to try not to harp on them a ton in a second, but this is what Dick Vitale has to say about Kentucky. With no Sweet 16 appearances since 2019, the Wildcats are looking to make a huge jump with new coach Mark Pope. With 9 transfers and 3 freshmen, the Wildcats need time to mesh and gain confidence, but should be primed for March. Notes that Kentucky has no returning players, and then also adds Kentucky is building from the ground up. The big-time transfer portal additions, he starts with Jackson Robinson and Otega Owe, Kobe Brea, Amari Williams, Butler, Carr, Garrison, Krisa, Olmanor, all of the players that you know and love. Travis Perry, Colin Chandler, Trent Noah, all here as freshmen. The Wildcats coming in at number 15 in Vitale's rankings. Again, I'm very happy with this. Hit the nail on the head. I think this team needs a little bit of time to kind of gain confidence and mesh, which really does bring into question how they are able to perform in that Duke game. If Kentucky's able to win that game, by the way, oh, man, I think a lot of fans are going to be excited as the season goes on. But I like this. I'm very, very pleased with this. I want to kind of talk here for a little bit about some of the teams surrounding Kentucky. There's a team underneath Kentucky that I actually think could possibly be ranked higher if you wanted to. And there are a couple of teams that are right above the Wildcats that I think could be ranked lower. Before we get into that, I just want to remind you guys, if you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel or the podcast feed, I would greatly appreciate it if you did so. There is a Locked On Kentucky Discord, in case you have not checked it out. It's a place for anybody in Big Blue Nation to talk about all things Kentucky basketball, football, baseball. EA Sports College Football is officially out. One of our members is actually trying to start an online dynasty league. If you want to get in on that, you can go and check out my Twitter/X at @LanceDawe_, and you can see pinned at the top of my profile a link to join the Discord. Again, at @LanceDawe_, link to join that Discord at the top of my profile. It's free. It's just a place for a bunch of us to chat about what's going on with Big Blue Nation. All right, wrapping up the Monday edition of Locked On Kentucky. So we've talked about here Kentucky ranking number 15 in Dick Vitale's preseason Sweet 16. I want to discuss here a few teams surrounding the Wildcats and kind of give my thoughts on where they're at. St. John's comes in as the 16th team in this Sweet 16. The Red Storm barely missed the NCAA tournament last year with Rick Pitino at the helm. Man, Rick Pitino has been as big of an advocate for the Wildcats this season as I've seen anybody be this offseason. It's a shame Kentucky didn't get an opportunity to play St. John's this year, that we have to wait one more season to see the Red Storm either come to Lexington or Kentucky go to play at MSG against them. But I'm very excited about the fact that we'll get to see Pitino and Pope square off and what should be, what I would expect to be an incredible game. If St. John's is able to kind of maintain their status as a borderline top 25 team, mid to low top 25 team, I mean, that should be an extremely competitive game, if not one Kentucky loses. But St. John's, man, their roster this year looks really solid. RJ Lewis is coming back. Simeon Wiltshire, Brady Dunlap. You've also got a couple of transfer portal additions that Kentucky also kind of wanted. Kadari Richmond from Seton Hall. Devion Smith from Utah, who was one of the best assist men in the entire country a season ago. They've got some really good players here. Also, a couple of really high-profile freshmen. Jaden Glover being the biggest addition here on paper. This is a good team. This is a team that I love being inside this top 16. I would have Kentucky and St. John's ranked above the next two teams I'm going to talk about. One of them, some of you are going to claim as bias. The other, I think you can understand where I'm coming from. It's getting to a point where I've talked about them like I think 3 times this offseason now, where some of you may classify it as hating. It's not hating. We're a metrics-based show. We talk about numbers. If your numbers are not good and you do not perform in the wins and loss column, which is the most important number of all, I don't understand why you're being ranked high in the preseason, especially when it's happened before. And yes, I'm talking about the Texas A&M Aggies. Texas A&M. I'm going to pull up the Ken Pomp stats again, and I'm not going to talk about it a ton today. Texas A&M last year was one of, I think they might have been preseason ranked 5th. They were a top 10 team coming into the year. After bringing back a lot of different pieces. Wade Taylor, Tyrese Radford, Manny Obasaki, Jace Carter, Solomon Washington, Anderson Garcia, who is one of the better rebounders in the nation. They have a lot of those guys running it back again. But do you remember what happened last season after A&M was ranked, top 10 to start the year? At one point, they were 15-13 and 3 games behind 500 in SEC play. They had to win 5 straight, 4 of those games away from College Station, to get into the NCAA tournament. They had to beat Georgia. They had to beat Mississippi State. They had to beat Ole Miss, who at that point had just given up at the end of the year. They had to beat Ole Miss again. Then they had to beat Kentucky. And in that Kentucky game, they just went ballistic from 3 for absolutely no reason. 11 of 26, by the way, for a team that statistically was, I think, with the 3rd worst three-point shooting team in the nation before they played the Wildcats. They ended up finishing 342nd. That's how good the performance was, I might add. They also scored 90 points in the loss to Florida while shooting 38%. So they caught fire after being bad the entire year. Wade Taylor, who can get a bucket. This is not on him. I'm not knocking him individually. He can get a bucket. He gets a lot of points. The reason he got a lot of points was because he had a lot of volume. He shot 302 threes and made 98 of them. 32.5% is not efficient enough. It's underneath the Division I average for me to say, hey, Wade Taylor alongside Henry Coleman, Solomon Washington, Manny Obasaki, different guys here that are coming right back to the program for an offense that was 341st in effective field goal percentage, was one of the worst teams in the SEC in three-point percentage, dead last in two-point percentage, 13th in free throw percentage, 14th in block percentage. It's not enough for me to say, oh, all of those guys are back, and at one point they were 15-13 and had to get lucky. it's like what, a 22 win team that you're projecting out here? If they manage to not have a slump against some really good SEC competition, by the way, the SEC's better than it was a season ago, I think. Yeah, it's not enough for them to be top 14. They're right above the Kentucky Wildcats. Is A&M a top 25 team? Sure. But 14th over St. John's and Kentucky? I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't have as much of a gripe with the Arkansas Razorbacks as I do Texas A&M. They're also not a top 15 team. Not right now. I'm sorry. This team is comprised of a portion of Kentucky players from a season ago and a bunch of high-profile freshmen who are ranked highly for a reason, and a bunch of high-profile freshmen that can't shoot on paper. They cannot shoot. The thing that kept Kentucky in games last year was their ability to shoot the basketball. Arkansas's staff is going to be primarily comprised of former Kentucky assistants and the former head coach of UK. Jonas Adu is going to be a very good defender. Adu Thiero, I think, is going to be a good defender. Trevon Brazile should be a good-ish defender. If you, as a staff, could not coach 2 lottery picks and some of the best freshmen in the nation, apparently, to even an average defensive output, how are we supposed to expect you to do it with this team? And then also, you have fighting you the fact that you brought in a ton of players that cannot shoot the basketball. You're going to have to be overly reliant on what happens at the rim. And you've got guys, to be fair, you've got guys that can score there. Wagner, Janelle Davis from FAU can fill it up. Boogie Flan can score at the rim. He's a high flyer as well. He's fun to watch. Zvonimir Ivasic at times can score at the rim. Billy Richmond can absolutely do it. Carter Knox can absolutely do it. They can score at the rim. But if you run into trouble, if you run into Auburn, if you run into a team like Texas A&M, who's really good on the glass, you're going to get shut down because you don't have enough outside shooters, guys that can knock it down consistently. Now, I may eat my words here. I may end up being completely wrong, and Arkansas may be one of the better three-point shooting teams in this conference. On paper, their options are limited. Boogie Fland and, honestly, Janelle Davis are probably their 2 best options. And outside of that, they don't have a ton to be excited about outside of the perimeter. I think it's not enough reason to knock them outside of the top 25. They're a top 25 team on paper. But top 13, with that being a primary weakness and also coaching concerns, which, by the way, completely just a heartfelt moment here for the show, just an honest moment. I would have said the exact same thing about Kentucky if this was the offseason that we were gifted. I would have said we're going to be better on defense, hopefully, if the coaching staff can get it together. But we don't have a ton of shooters, and that's what made us good last year. So are we just kind of reverting back to the offense of old? I'm kind of concerned if we don't have a Sheboy out there, how we're going to operate at a high efficiency rate. Say the same thing about Arkansas. They could prove me wrong. They could just run and dunk. That could be their team, and it could be fun to watch, and it could be effective. They could play better defense, and that could solve all their problems. But there are concerns on paper, and there are concerns about how this team's going to, frankly, be coached. Would have said the same thing about Kentucky, especially coming off of that loss to Oakland. It would have been, this is it. That would have been it for Cal. We would have said, heading into the offseason, this is the last one. This is the last time we're doing this. and you're kind of going back to what you used to do. So let's see if it works. Arkansas, top 25 team, not a top 13 team, in my opinion. I think St. John's, Kentucky, I think on paper right now, they are more complete in all aspects of the game. On paper. Now we'll see how they perform. I may end up being wrong. Arizona at number 12. Purdue at number 11. Have no issue with that. I think you could legitimately put the Arizona Wildcats a little higher. They returned 4 of their top 8 scorers. Caleb Love is back. Again, not big on the efficiency that Caleb Love had, but I think that offense with players surrounding him, I think that offense does kind of lend itself to be more efficient, even whenever you have players like him who are high volume, but not like the best when it comes to efficiency and shooting percentage. But Purdue, guess what? They got another really tall center, 7'3" player, Daniel Jacobson. Freshman is probably going to be an impact player for them immediately. 5 of the top 8 scores are back. Funny enough, Auburn's here at number 10, Purdue at number 11. Auburn and Purdue just scheduled a 2-year series, one of them happening in Birmingham, which is in Alabama, and then another in Indianapolis next year. So that's going to be really fun to watch these two tangle. But Auburn has a very good front court once more, more efficient than they were shooting the basketball, I think, a season ago. I think a little bit more physical in different aspects, and they were a very physical team last year. I think Auburn deserves to be in this top 15. Duke, I think, could be a little higher here. They got a nice blend of youth and then experience. It kind of mashes together in a weird way, but I like Duke's roster. Gonzaga at number 8, I think they could possibly be a couple of spots higher. I think they could be higher, honestly, than somebody like, I think if you put Gonzaga and UConn together right now, I would take the Bulldogs to win that game in just a neutral site. But Gonzaga at number 8 because they bring so much back. I think they're going to be really good. Baylor's going to be nuts, dude. Baylor's going to be nuts. Langston Love, Jaden Nunn is back. You've got one of the best players in the country, and VJ Edgecombe, who's going to be insane. Norchad Omier is here from Miami, previously at Arkansas State, if I'm not mistaken. And I think also, like, Utah, it's not Utah Valley. Maybe I'm wrong. It's a team out in Utah. He's been around the block, Norchad has. Jeremy Roach from Duke, who's one of the nation's best three-point shooters last year and also one of the best guards in the nation, period. Baylor's going to be so good. Then you have North Carolina. 5 of their top 8 scorers are back. RJ Davis, Seth Trimble, Elliot Cadeau, Jalen Withers, Jalen Washington. You add Cade Tyson from Belmont, who is such a North Carolina player. You've got a couple of 5-star prospects in Ian Jackson and Drake Powell. Like I said earlier, college basketball is going to be so fun this year. I'm so excited. The fact that college football is almost back, the fact that we get to talk about Mark Stoops and Kentucky football with SEC Media Days in a few days, and we also get to talk about what's happening with actual practices as we get closer to college basketball season. I'm so excited. It's all about to be back, man. I'm thrilled. Iowa State at number 5 returned their top 4 scorers from a team that was also just defensively dominant at times, and they absolutely destroyed Houston in the Big 12 tournament. And speaking of the Cougars, they're here at number 4. 8 of their top 10 scorers with LJ Cryer and Emmanuel Sharp in the backcourt. It's a good year to be a college basketball fan, man. UConn's coming back looking for a three-peat. 5 of their top 9 scores are back. Alabama at number 2. 3 of the top 5 in Mark Sears, Grant Nelson, Latrell Wrightsell. They brought in an excellent transfer portal class as well, and they got some really good, like excellent scores from the freshman class as well. Kansas, Bama, UConn, Houston, Iowa State, North Carolina, Baylor, Gonzaga, Duke, Auburn, Purdue, Arizona. I mean, that's such a good top 12 right there. I mean, that is genuinely such a strong top 12. I'm thrilled for college basketball this upcoming season, man. I'm so excited. Let me know what you think in the comments below about Kentucky, top 15, about other teams surrounding them. Should they be higher? Should they be lower? Is it just right? You can let me know. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hey, you can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. You can follow me on Twitter at LanceDawe_, and you can follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, leave those in the YouTube comments below. Hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless.